Welcome back. I hope you're tucked in comfortably tonight. The world outside can be so loud, so rushed, but in here, time slows down just for you. Listen to the rain falling gently against the glass. Let the cold stay outside. Adjust your blankets, rest your head on the soft pillow, and just breathe tonight. I want to tell you a story. A story about a cozy little house, an old armchair, a warm cup of Earl Grey tea, and a quiet man named Arthur. So lie down, let the soothing sound of the rain wash over you, and listen to my voice. The grandfather clock in the foyer did not tick like a normal clock. It groaned a low, rust-caked rattle that sounded distinctly like an old man trying to clear phlegm from his throat before giving a stern lecture. He took a slow, warm sip. The tea was comforting, tasting remarkably like pure nostalgia mixed with a faint, metallic aftertaste, like sucking on a copper penny. That was when he noticed the wallpaper. The pattern was an intricate weave of faded yellow damask, but as Arthur squinted over the rim of his cup, the swirling floral motifs seemed to shift. They didn't move rapidly, mind you, no dramatic writhing or horror movie contortions. It was more of a polite, bureaucratic readjustment. A vine subtly stretched half an inch to the left to cover a microscopic tear in the plaster. Odd, he thought. I could have sworn that flower had 5 petals 5 minutes ago. Now it has 6. A very ambitious flower. Arthur set his teacup down. He stood up, his knees giving a dry, splintering crack, a sound remarkably similar to the floorboards beneath his slippers. As he stepped toward the hallway, his slippered foot met the Persian rug. The floorboards didn't just squeak beneath him. They let out a long, wet slurp, the exact sound a heavy boot makes when pulled out of deep marsh mud. Arthur paused. He leaned down, peering at the baseboard near the floor. Something caught the dim lamplight. It wasn't a loose thread. He reached out with 2 fingers and pulled. It came free with a faint, sticky pop. It was a hair. Long, coarse, and bleached blonde. Arthur held it up to the light. Arthur had been bald since 1982. His late wife, Martha, had been a brunette. The previous owner of the house, at least according to the deeds he couldn't quite remember reading, had been a retired naval officer named Captain Vance. Arthur looked closer at the gap in the plaster. Strands of hair, blonde, raven, silver, curly, straight, were caught in the tiny cracks like dried sea kelp. And stuck to one particularly stubborn clump was a tiny gold tooth filling. Arthur didn't panic. He was, if nothing else, a deeply logical retired accountant. He sat back on his heels and began to stack the strange arithmetic of his surroundings. Item 1, the dry cleaner's mug from a city he'd never visited. Item 2, the stew bubbling on the stove, which tasted not just like a beef stew, but specifically the stew his mother made on November 12, 1958, right down to the slightly singed bay leaf. Item 3, the wallpaper that rearranged itself to keep the room looking tidy. Item 4, the hair and the gold tooth, crushed into the seams of the baseboard like unwashed dishes crammed into a sink. He looked around the room, taking in the soft, golden light filtering through the lace curtains. Outside, a blue sedan was parked under an oak tree. It had been parked there when he woke up this morning. It had been parked there yesterday. And now that he truly thought about it, the autumn leaf drifting past the window had been halfway through its fall for what felt like several decades. This isn't a structure, Arthur said quietly to the quiet parlor. A structure holds things up. A structure doesn't cater. He pressed his palm against the wall. It didn't feel like drywall. It was dry and warm, but beneath the wallpaper there was a microscopic, rhythmic thrumming. Not a pulse of blood, but a vibration, like a cat purring underground. You aren't a house at all, are you? Arthur mused, his fingers tracing a damask leaf. You're a trap or a stomach. The room seemed to hold its breath. The ticking of the grandfather clock hitched. Arthur pieced it together, out loud, with the calm precision of balancing a ledger. You lure people in, Arthur continued, turning around slowly. You collect them. Captain Vance, the blonde woman, the others whose teeth you couldn't quite sweep away. You feed on us. But not our flesh, no. My body is long gone, isn't it? He held his hand up to the lamplight. No shadow fell behind his fingers. No breath fogged the air when he exhaled. You feed on time, Arthur said softly. On memories. On the quiet, sugary weight of human contentment. But the others, they fought you, didn't they? They realized they were trapped. They screamed. They sourly rotted in fear. And fear must taste dreadful to something that prefers the flavor of a Sunday afternoon. A long, low vibration shuddered through the floorboards, not a roar of anger, but a deep, resonant hum that felt eerily like a pet seeking approval. The creature was dropping its subtlety, not out of malice, but because Arthur had finally asked the right question. Through the thin veil of the illusion, Arthur felt the entity's vast, ancient consciousness brushing against his mind. It was a cosmic parasite, yes, thousands of years old, wandering the earth in the shape of whatever shelter humanity built. But it was also horribly, profoundly lonely. For centuries, its guests had ruined the meal. They panicked. They broke the furniture. They tried to burn the walls. They filled the entity's gullet with the bitter, acrid taste of horror and desperation, until the entity had to dissolve them completely just to make the noise stop. And then came Arthur. Arthur, who had arrived 40 years ago as a tired, lonely widower with no one left to call. Arthur, who didn't scream when the doors locked. Arthur, who drank his Earl Grey, admired the woodwork, and politely said thank you to the empty room whenever the radiator clinked on a cold evening. The entity hadn't digested Arthur. It had savored him. It had built a pristine, eternal Tuesday afternoon around his spirit, endlessly looping his favorite meals, his warmest childhood memories, and his quietest moments, just to keep him content. Because as long as Arthur was happy, the entity tasted peace. A soft slurp sounded near the baseboard. The blonde hair dissolved. The gold tooth flicked away into the floor grate. The subtle tear in the wallpaper smoothed itself out with desperate speed. An aggressive, almost apologetic burst of warm lavender polish and freshly baked chocolate chip cookies washed over the room. The house was terrified not that Arthur would escape, but that Arthur would start screaming like the rest of them. That the warmth would turn cold. Arthur stood in the center of the living room, listening to the anxious, steady purr of the ancient monstrosity wrapped around his soul. He looked at the front door. He knew that if he forced his way out, if he demanded the harsh, absolute truth of death, the illusion would shatter. He would step into the cold, empty void of non-existence, and the creature would be left alone again in the dark. Arthur walked back to the burgundy armchair. He smoothed his trousers, sat down, and picked up his porcelain teacup. The Earl Grey was still steaming, perfectly hot, tasting of bergamot and 6 decades of quiet solitude. "You know," Arthur said into the warm, waiting air, "your housekeeping could use a bit of work." The hair was a terribly sloppy touch. The floorboards gave a tiny, ashamed creak. "However," Arthur continued, leaning his head back against the soft, velvet cushion, "the stew was superb. And I must admit I've always preferred a long, quiet afternoon to whatever comes next." He took a slow, deliberate sip. "A little less lavender polish next time," Arthur whispered, closing his eyes with a gentle smile. "But otherwise carry on." The grandfather clock let out a deep, contented sigh. The artificial sun outside shone just a fraction brighter. The rain outside drummed a cozy, hypnotic rhythm against the glass, and the infinite, comfortable loop began once more. And so, Arthur rested in his warm armchair, completely safe, completely at peace. There is nowhere you need to go tonight. No house to escape, no worries to solve, no work to finish. Just like Arthur, you can let go of the world outside. Let the warmth of your room wrap around you like a soft blanket. Feel the heavy, comfortable weight in your arms and your legs. The rain will keep falling outside soft, and continuous listen to the rain. Feel your eyelids grow heavier, and heavier. Now sleep, close your eyes. As your eyes grow, heavy sleep, good night.